it would be nice to just know. Atlanta, thank you. Welcome to the call. Spain, wow. UK, welcome. Put in where you're joining us from. We have 2 more minutes. I have someone from Kenya. Thank you. Welcome, Karibu. Right. Liberia, welcome. Yes, we can now begin our session. Thank you very much for joining. I'll be your moderator for today. I want to welcome everyone from all over the world who is joining us today. My name is Cynthia Njeri, and I lead global partnerships at Workpay, where I help organizations who are expanding in Africa. What we do at Workpay, we help organizations with multi-country platform. We have our payroll overseeing companies with local entities where we help them to manage their local statutories, payroll calculations for compliance, and then employer of record, which is our final piece without legal entities in Africa, but they want to hire local experts, local talent, or even local experts. So for me, I spend a lot of time working closely with HR and global companies in UR partners, first both opportunities and the real challenges that organizations are facing when it comes to across Africa. So I'll be your moderator in today's session, and I'm really excited to have this conversation. And of course, I'm joined by 2 main experts who are going to give us expert opinions when it comes to what slows down hiring in Africa. And then with that, I'd like just open the floor for us to hire Africa. That when you think about it, it's very simple on paper, whereby people have large, Africa right now, we have large talent pools, we have a growing economy, and so increased digital adoption. But once companies begin to hire, the reality now kicks in. We realize that it's a lot complex than we thought. We realize that as much as we have talent, there are other things that we should focus on, and compliance is one of them. Even just setting up an entity in Africa is a lot harder than people think that it would be. So in this case, we are going to look at how in this discussion, we're just going to unpack what actually slows down hiring in Africa and beyond just the obvious. So more importantly, how are forward-thinking companies trying to solve this problem where they're ensuring that they're hiring efficiently and compliantly and also at scale. And then in terms of expectations, so by the end of this call, my expectation should be you should walk away with a clearer understanding of the real bottleneck and how to navigate more with confidence and speed when it comes to Africa. And when it comes to hiring, when it comes to payments, when it comes to payroll, when it comes to anything that is related to hiring in Africa. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. I'll just give a brief about him and then our second speaker as well, and then we're going to get right into it. So our first speaker is called Nelson Mwai. He works at Workpay. He has helped us through through guiding clients through complex across 30 plus countries. He brings a wealth of experience across legal, compliance, and tax, making him uniquely positioned to speak to the realities of operating across African markets. And then our second speaker is Cynthia. I know they're going to add more even as we begin, but I just want to give you a height of what they're bringing in when you're having this discussion. So we have Cynthia Burungu, a founder at Optimum Options Limited. Cynthia brings a deep experience in bilingual global talent acquisition and has worked closely with companies navigating multi-country hiring across Africa. What stands out is her understanding in the international development space and a track record building high-performing teams in complex international markets. She's an expert in talent acquisition and get right in terms of just helping them give us maybe their opening remarks, and then now we can do a poll. So Nelson, I'd like you to have
great. Yeah, thank you very much, Cynthia. Thank you, Cynthia. My name is Nelson. Currently, I lead legal operations at Workpay, and about the experience in the front row seat of observing and also implementing scale across the African continent. And what I mean by that is I've been involved in, of course, setting up of entities across the continent, ensuring that that's done compliantly and in a very efficient structure. The next thing is I've been involved in hiring of people across the continent and obviously providing advice from a tax, labor law, compliance perspective, and observing how people scale across the continent, as well as the bottlenecks of scaling and hiring in Africa. So I'm looking forward to this webinar where we'll be discussing the key issues or the key details that you should be aware of if you're hiring here in Africa and if you want to expand across the continent, as well as how we can help you do that efficiently and quickly. Yeah, so over to you, Cynthia.
Cynthia Burungu, you can introduce yourself. Hello?
Good afternoon. My name is Cynthia Burungu. I am the lead bilingual talent acquisition for Optimum Options. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you all for joining in. Looking forward to fruitful and good discussions this afternoon. We will be diving deep into what would really slow you down when it comes to hiring across Africa. I have partnered with several organizations within the development space, as well as the corporate SMEs in hiring for talent all the way from executive level to lower cadre levels. And so our experience runs deep within East, West Africa, as well as other Southern African countries. So thank you, and looking forward to these conversations.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you very much. I think we would want to run our first poll. Just please help us with that. So our first poll is, are you currently hiring or planning to hire in Africa in 2026?
Yes, absolutely. We are hiring in Africa. Some of the countries that we have been very fortunate to work in include DRC, Tanzania, Benin, Burkina Faso, looking into Senegal and other neighboring countries, Ghana, Kenya, Ethiopia. And so at the moment, we are hiring in Benin, we are hiring in DRC. And every country comes with its own very different dynamics in terms of the hiring that you need to really be able to look out as a hiring manager, as an employer. Understanding the local market, because not one size fits all markets, or let me say regions within the Africa. There are certain in country-specific, region-specific regulatory and compliance when it comes to labor laws, when it comes to taxes. You need to understand business registrations. And one of the things that I would highly recommend is, before you commence the hiring and before we commence hiring, it's important to ensure that all the registration is in place. You are actually legally allowed to hire in that country, because that can really slow down the process of hiring. I'll be sharing a bit more as we go on, but yeah, that's it.
Then on to our audience. Is anyone looking to hire in Africa in 2026? Wow, the results are in. Yes, we have 58% of you saying yes, they're looking to hire. And then we have 17 of you saying no. And we have around 24% saying not immediately, but they're thinking about it. So which is a very good thing for us when we are thinking about hiring. Then on to our second poll. Our second poll is on, I know that we have a bit of, we have something that we think about when we think about hiring across Africa that you know. Yes. Awesome. I'm seeing it's coming up. Oh, this is so interesting. Okay, interesting. So we have 46% of you that you must set up an entity before you hire. That is 44% of you are saying that. I'll just wait for all the results to come in and then I can give you the insights that I'm seeing you guys sharing. But this is so interesting. Okay, one more minute. Yes. And we have the winner being, you must set up an entity before hiring. And I feel like today we are going to demystify that in this call. We are going to get out of this call, no, is that really necessary? Or can we even hire even without setting up an organization or an entity in Africa? Yeah, it's actually going up. We have 48% of you saying that you must have an entity before you hire. So thank you very much, the audience, for engaging us. And I want us to start now with the expectations versus the reality of what we know. And I want us to begin with Cynthia, where we are going to speak about this topic in terms of the operator's lens, where you tell us with the companies that you work with, what do they expect hiring across Africa to look like at the start? Like, what do they expect when they're thinking about hiring? And because you help a lot with recruitment, maybe you can just now tell us what is the expectation when it comes to that.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. I'm really delighted to see the polls there's a high majority that there must be an entity before any organization or any business get into hiring. It's really important. I've seen some entities that do the hiring before the approvals are done, and what that does is, should the approvals experience any delays or experience any dynamics when it comes to the approvals, and maybe you are denied, then really that can work against the company's reputation, as well as looking into how much time and effort you will have just spent doing the reverse. So I would say, in terms of the expectations versus reality, ensure that you have an entity in place before you can hire. It will speak to your credibility. It will also speak to just ensuring that you have a peace of mind as you navigate the different countries that you're looking to expand in Africa. I'd say within the hiring and experiences that we have in the recruitment is the speed. Many of our clients expect, once they come to us and they want to hire, some of them would say, I want this role in 10 days. Some African countries, depending on the position, it may pose a challenge when it comes to that kind of speed. So in a few weeks, yes, the processes will begin, but we need to be worried that every country, every role, every when it comes to the qualifications, some of these African countries, they have challenges when it comes to infrastructure, and so you cannot expect the same kind of fast-paced speed that we operate with in other developed African countries. So we have to be worried on that. The assumption also on simplicity, there's a belief that processes can be easily replicated. What happens in Kenya or happens in any other African countries, you can replicate everywhere. That is not true. Every country has different, in terms of its operations, tax, employment practices. You'll find, for example, Senegal, where I have worked for several years now, the contract must be in French, and they must be drafted by actually an employment lawyer. And like here, for instance, in East Africa, where the contracts can be drafted by HR and not necessarily having been reviewed by a lawyer, but you find within the Francophone countries, they must be actually drafted by either an employment lawyer or just someone that is within the legal space, and ensuring they are in that language. So it's important to understand these dynamics, to understand the different labor laws that apply. Overconfidence, I've seen, is also something that is another dynamic where businesses or entities that are looking to expand, they underestimate the operational complexities. Business can scale quickly across multiple markets, but if you don't understand the nitty-gritties of the operational complexities in those territories, they can really weigh you down. For example, when it comes to payroll, how you manage when it comes to compliance, when you come to onboarding, it's just important to understand those complexities so that you can also just be able to mitigate them ahead of time. Again, when many businesses are setting up, they have lean teams, and they would expect those lean teams to be able to execute a lot. Many times when you have unlimited number of workforce, it also poses challenges when it comes to planning, when it comes to coordination. Can just set up, it can create a lot of setbacks. So it's important to also just analyze and see how many teams, how many people do we need in what capacities, what departments to be able to host before you can be able to kick it off. Thank you.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Cynthia.
Okay, okay, fantastic. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you everybody for your time. Cynthia is experiencing a bit of a technical issue, but I think we can go on with the conversation even as we continue. And the next question is to you, Nelson. Based on what Cynthia has told us about some of the
On
expectations.
to our second question. Nelson, this is you on our second speaker. So through these expectations, we're going to look at it in terms of the compliance lens. So when is the expectation for legal and regulatory standpoint to come in? What are the early frictions that we see when we look at the compliance bit of things?
Yeah, great. So let me just start from the very beginning when you're hiring someone on the African continent. So there are a couple of things that will be very clear to you about Africa. The first thing is, of course, it's a cliche that Africa is a very big place. And being a very big place, it has different countries with different regulations. But the way I like looking at it is from a lens or from a vantage point of regions. So we have a region like North Africa that has a very peculiar set of laws. Then we have another region in West Africa with a very peculiar set of laws as well. Then we have the Central African region that, of course, has its regulations.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Hello? Hello, can you hear me, guys?
Okay. Nelson, I was asking you, when you look at the compliance aspect, tell us about the expectations for people who are looking to hire in Africa when it comes to the legal and the regulatory landscape.
That's what I was explaining. Sorry if you didn't hear me at all. But let me just start it over from the very beginning as to how you should view Africa, or the lens you should look Africa at. So the first one is Africa. Obviously, it's a cliche now that Africa is a very big continent and has very different countries with very different set of laws. But that said, there are certain regions or regional laws that apply across certain regions. Case in point, if you look at North Africa, they have a particular set of laws that, albeit being different, has a couple of similarities. All right. Then we have Central African region with its own similarities, but of course, its difference. We have another a region called West Africa that actually has a common currency, more or less a very common company law, and very different labor laws, but there's certain similarities between many West African countries. Then, of course, the other region is the West African region, or what we call the Anglophone East Africa and South Africa region. It has its own peculiar differences, but it's still very, very similar. So let's begin with the first problem that you're going to face if you want to hire in Africa. The first problem is, how will you hire compliantly in a continent with so many different laws and so many different countries? Then that becomes your first hurdle. And the first problem you're going to face is that operating or setting up entities in these countries is not a small feat. It's very, very difficult for you to do that. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of resources. It takes a lot of energy and effort. And sometimes, especially in Francophone Africa and North Africa, you will have to travel to that country. Now, there's a difference between setting up an entity and actually operating the entity. So if you want to operate the entity, and I'll start now with sort of the West African region, there are certain people that you will need for that to work. So the first is almost always you will need a director or someone who's based in that country who will be signing forms for you and stamping documents for you and going to the bank for you and being a signatory to the bank account. Now, that is not a written requirement, but for you to operate there, you will almost always need it. The second that you will need is an office space. Now, like Cynthia Mburugu just said, when you're contracting with an employee in West Africa, you will need that particular sign, and you have to take it to the Labor Inspectorate to verify that what's written in that contract applies with the laws of that country, which is way how it works here in Africa. Now, if you go to West Africa, that's actually a requirement. The other problem that you will face is that in West Africa, unlike in East and South Africa, the banking system is very archaic and it's very, very old. So what that means is you need a signatory who will be going to banks on a regular basis. They will need to see you on a regular basis. You need to physically sign checks because most of the times these things don't work or sort of the internet credentials don't work. And you also need a signatory who's based in that country. So the first expectation versus reality is that operating a company in Africa is very, very, very hard. Now, if you come to this other region of Anglophone Southern Africa, case in point Zimbabwe, case in point South Africa, you need what they call a public officer. Now, a public officer is a person who represents you before the tax authority. Now, the problem with that is that you need someone who will be a public officer, and very, very few people would accept to take up that liability, all right? And if they do, then it will be at a very steep price. Now, that's the other expectation versus reality on it. Now, let's say you've already set up the company, you've already jumped over the hurdles of operationalizing it and working on it, and now it's time for you to actually hire. And it's West Africa, you've signed a contract, you need to take it to the Labor Inspectorate, they have a problem with the clause, you need to bring it back, the person needs to review it. It's a logistical nightmare, all right? And that's obviously one of those expectation versus reality hitting you very badly, because now you realize that having an entity and operating are two totally different things. Now, you've set up, you have someone, you've jumped over that hurdle, and now it's time for you to actually, let's say, have a disciplinary session, or let's say have a performance review of an employee, and you need to sort of find a way to terminate them or get them on a performance improvement plan. What that means is you will have to either find an employment lawyer in that country, or you'll have to find a way to do it compliantly. And almost always in certain countries, it doesn't end well. Case in point, if you make a mistake in South Africa, they actually have an electronic tribunal, or sort of a tribunal that can operate virtually. So that means if an employee has an issue with their termination, they simply log onto that portal, they lodge their complaint, and the CCMA, as you call it, is able to kick off that process all over again. Now, that's another problem that you will face. So what to do, what to provide these employees as entitlements, how to understand the labor laws is also another issue. Now, the final issue, of many, but I'm just, in the interest of time, just trying to list out the ones I've seen that are very problematic. The other problem is you may miss out, or you may miss on a certain given registration. Some registrations are not too obvious in most countries. Case in point, if you want to do, let's say, a COIDA registration in South Africa, it's very easy to miss it. But the problem is, if you now if the COIDA officials come or to do an audit on your office, it's very likely that you're going to have missed certain registrations. Now, you can imagine you're hiring one person in Benin, another person in Burkina Faso, 2 people in Ivory Coast, 3 people in Central African Republic. It's very hard for you to justify the cost and the logistical nightmare of setting up your own entities in all these countries just to hire these people. Sometimes, or almost all the time, if you don't have a very huge operation, or you don't have a real reason why you should set up in that country, it's always better to use an employer of record. So over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you very much, Nelson, for that very detailed overview. I think you've touched on points in terms of what actually slows people down when they're hiring within these different African countries. And I actually wanted to tap into some of the experiences you've had, again, setting up for Workpay across the over 35 countries that we have set up. In speaking to some of the aspects that could actually slow people down. And again, now we are looking at things like the timelines for registration. I know you've touched about on the administrative part, the importance of having the different regulatory or compliance partners locally, and how much that would essentially cost to be something that we would want to hear a lot more about. Because when you're considering hiring, there's also the setup cost, the cost of you physically being in those specific countries. And when it comes to having a lower number of employees, how then do companies navigate this when it comes to setting up and the delays they may face when it comes to the time it takes with the different regulatory organizations within those countries?
Yeah, that's a great question. So thank you, of course, for acknowledging that Workpay is in different countries in Africa, about that you want to be precise, or that you want to be precise. And some of the bottlenecks or sort of the hurdles that you're going to face before setting up your entities across these countries. The first one, obviously, is cost. And what I mean by cost is not only the cost that you need to pay the professionals who are helping you to set up the company, but also the other statutory fees that you're going to have to set up or to enter into those countries. Now, let me give you an example of two countries. Let's start, of course, with Ethiopia. We know Ethiopia has a very, very stringent regulation, especially when it comes to companies that are owned by foreigners. So let's say you're Kenyan, but you want to go to Ethiopia. The first thing is, unless the entire company or very huge portion of it is owned by an Ethiopian, or you co-own it with an Ethiopian, if you want it to be fully owned by yourself as a Kenyan, you'll need to deposit a total of $200,000 inside of the country. So what the professionals will tell you is you get in the money, you put it in a bank account, the receipt of the bank account then is taken to the registration authority, and then you can get the money out. But the reality is, once the money gets into Ethiopia, getting that money out is a total nightmare. And almost always you can never get it out. The other country that you'll have the same problem is a country like Lesotho. I know it's a very small country, but with huge opportunities. And it also has the same regulation where you have to put in a lot of money to justify or to enable you to get a business license. But then getting out the money from Lesotho to your company almost always will never work. The other country that has the same problem happens to be in Ghana, where they're amending the laws now. So it may be likely that very soon or in a couple of weeks we'll not be having this problem. But it's either you deposit a very huge hundreds of thousands of dollars for you to own it as a person or as a foreigner, or you have to you have to get into a partnership with a Ghanaian national for it to work, or you have to set up as a branch of your entity wherever it's based. Now the problem is most companies in Africa would rather use that money to enable the operations, or sort of to expand the operations, rather than using that money, tying it up in a bank account in a foreign country with no timeline of when that money is actually coming in. Now, that's a very, very big hurdle when it comes to costs. The other problem is, like I said, having a company and operating it are two totally different things. So you may have the entity, you may think the entity is doing well, but when it comes to, let's say, the bank account is not working and you can't pay your employees, then that becomes a very huge issue. The third one is paying of taxes, calculation of taxes, calculation of social security, payments of that social security, interactions with regulators, for instance, depending on the kind of industry that you're in, obviously takes up not only a lot of your time, but also a lot of resources from that end. And this, of course, compounds the costs of operations, but also compounds the logistical nightmare and obviously the problems that you're going to be facing, and they're going to wake you up at night, no doubt at all. So rather than facing all these hurdles, in my view, unless I have another reason why I have to be in that country, if I'm just hiring a couple of people on the African continent, it's best for me to leave that nightmare to somebody else.
Awesome, Nelson, and thank you for answering that question comprehensively for us. So on our audience, you can start putting your questions on the Q&A session so that we can answer them even as we proceed. Cynthia, this is on to you. When these delays happen, when these organizations are hiring, what are the impacts that we see happening now to even internal teams? Cynthia, you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for noting that. I was actually speaking to myself. Yeah, so when these delays do happen, because they do happen, they greatly affect the timelines when it comes to hiring. There's a lot of pressure that goes into the team that is looking into, putting in place the timelines for the project. And so you can understand once the whole process of bringing in the team that you need is delayed, that will definitely affect the timelines in terms of the projects you want to do. It will affect, your business goals, as well as the people that you're looking to hire. When it is rushed, you may actually end up bringing people that are not aligned to what you are looking to achieve. Hence, it's important just to allow time and not to rush it when it comes to bringing in your A team, the available talent in the market. Some countries, it takes time, before you can be able to get through all the steps. The project kickoffs, expansion plans, once they stall, it can also just create a lot of demoralization with the people that are going through that. And so that time that is lost, it doesn't augur well with the teams. Hence, it's important that we just ensure that we are time sensitive when it comes to, whether it's the market entry, whether it's the timelines for our hiring. We're giving ample time. We've done ample research. It's important to do ample research so that, again, you're understanding the terrain that you're getting in. As you've heard from my colleague, every country has got its own very different. Some countries are not as fast-paced as we are in East Africa. West Africa is a whole different territory there. Everything is do small, which means slow, hakuna matata, like just slow. They take long breaks, which is something that here in East Africa, we're always very fast-paced and getting things done. And so it's important for any businesses that is getting into, whether it's North, South, West, or East Africa, get it right. Because once you have stalled projects, once you have stalled approvals, as I had alluded earlier, you may end up getting lower quality hires. You may get up also your reputation as an institution, as an organization is at stake. And again, candidates may lose interest. You've had situations where some candidates would ask you which organization, especially if you've not disclosed on the advert. And if they see the name of a certain organization, and probably that particular organization has a track record of maybe not getting through to the full recruitment cycle, then you'll find you're losing the trust and interest of certain candidate. Again, there's a lot of pressure when it comes to just having these timelines, internal pressure from the teams, which is not healthy for when you're starting, when you're setting up. It's important just to ensure that there's full support, there's seamless when it comes to the processes to reduce on workload, to reduce on pressures, and just to avoid getting into reactive situations. That can it can work against the business. It can work against the organization in terms of achieving their strategic goals, as the team will be more focused on firefighting and they're missing out on really the actuals where they need to be focused on their deliverables, on their goals, and what they need to do. So I would say it's very critical to ensure that the projects are completed within the timelines that you need to be able to do them. And again, ample time for hiring so that you can get quality candidates, especially when you're starting off. I always say the most important part of a flight when you're flying out is the takeoff and the landing. And so the takeoff of any business, the takeoff of any project is always very, very critical. If you get it right, you succeed. If you get it wrong, then you're going to have some revenue losses, slow hiring that can, of course, impact on your costs overall, as well as to say morale and other operational risk that you may pose your organization to. Thank you, and
very much, Cynthia, for covering that comprehensively. And you have talked about something very important when it comes to the reputation of an organization and how that can affect employees, both internally and also the reputation of the organization externally. So my next question will tie into the regulatory aspect of this hiring. And this question is over to you, Nelson, where I'd like you to tell us what statutory requirements are often missed before employees can legally start maybe in a new country or in an organization. I think that would be very important for us to understand, so that even when people are thinking about hiring, those are some of the things that they're looking at right now. I can't hear you. Just check whether you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
So let me start with the first and most obvious issue. The first one is you need to have the right to work in that country. So that these times when someone thinks that because they are from the ECOWAS region, they can simply move from Nigeria to Ivory Coast and work like nothing's wrong with that. The truth is, in most countries, you will need to get a work permit or be a national of that country. So that's the first and most important filter that you should do, or that you should have to undertake to ensure that this person has the right to work and stay in that country. All right. The next one is, if you've already set up your own entity, you need to ensure that all deductions are being deducted and obviously being remitted to the respective authority. Now, the problem usually comes when you've either not registered for a particular registration. Case in point, CNSS or Social Security in Benin or Senegal or Burkina Faso, you've actually done a wrong calculation. The problem is that different countries have different ways or different things or different computation standards. In Kenya, you don't have any relief if you have a lot of kids. But if you go to West Africa, depending on the kids you have, then the taxes and the Social Security are commensurate to the size of the family. Now, the problem is if you apply the same rules that are applied in Kenya and you apply them on this other end, it's very likely you're going to make a mistake. And making a mistake is fatal in certain countries. There's some countries where your company will literally be wiped off from the register of companies. They call it commerce registry. They'll literally wipe you off on account of you not computing those taxes and Social Security accurately. Now, the penalties that accrue in certain countries like Ivory Coast are just staggering. I'm talking about 300, 400% on the principal amount that you do not deduct and remit to that particular statutory body. And of course, we've seen, some other players in this space being in that problem, and it's rendered them bankrupt, literally wiping them off business because the fines are just staggering. That's the next very, 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 very important step that you need to make. You need to know what deductions to make, how to make them, when to make them, how to file them, and the receipts that accrue on account of what you've paid. So that's extremely important. The third important thing is you've hired this person, all right? These contracts in certain countries need to be registered, all right? So imagine you've used a Kenyan template to employ someone in Senegal, only for you to go to the Senegalese registration service, and you simply cannot register that kind of a contract. And of course, there's a back and forth, and Cindy and your HR team is obviously incensed, and maybe the talent as well wonders, what you're doing, because it just sounds very amateurish, right? So that's equally another regulatory hurdle that you need to be very careful about. So let me just stop there. Those are the key things you need to be aware of. And of course, and I know as we go along, I'll keep mentioning others.
Yeah, I'm telling you, our Q&A session is on fire in terms of the questions that you are being asked, and be assured that you're going to answer them even as we proceed with this conversation. I think I just want to ask you one more question, Cynthia, when it comes to the operation, on the operational bit, in terms of the inefficiencies. What happens when these inefficiencies come? What is the number one thing that is affected when operationally organizations are not even ready to start? Please unmute.
All right, fantastic. Yeah, thank you. I would say each country, in terms of readiness to start, it's very important. And I'll just echo what my colleague has mentioned, and just to add on to that, the operational realities in each country. I've seen many businesses engage employer of records, which is something that I would recommend when it comes to just being able to navigate these different regions, ensuring that your payroll is aligned to the taxations, is aligned to all the statutory deductions that need to be in place, and it's correct, because there's also probably, if you're using the local currencies, the conversions, if you're again converting into dollar, some of these countries, especially just a country like DRC, where they don't do M-Pesa, and you would need to adopt to their local currency. Or you find a country like Senegal, where you have to work with the CFA. Getting a dollar account is even problematic. So again, you have to really be worried in terms of the payroll and be ready. And I'm really glad that Workpay is here, and that's what you people do in terms of setting up the payroll, the HR and payroll systems across Africa. And I would actually advocate for anyone that is getting into these countries to work with an employer of record, work with a system that would help them to navigate that, because many times you find if a system is set up in a certain country, then it's already been preset in terms of the statutory deductions that need to be there. Yeah, so the complexities also go beyond just payroll and looking into the currencies, which is important. But there's also the benefits that, you know, you have to also ensure that depending on the region, you are aligning to those. The pensions, again, they differ from country to country, factoring that in place. And then the contracts, aligning those to the labor laws. If you don't have a system in place, that can really slow you down. And so it is important just to have that in place. You know, if you find yourself in a situation where you're not ready, I would recommend working with an employer of record. And I can make some recommendations in terms of some of the employer of records that we've been able to use in Africa, basically. And you can engage them depending again on what you're looking to achieve, but they can get you to get set up faster, and just to avoid those, you know, the legal or litigation risk that you can get into when it comes to setting up.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, for that comprehensive feedback. I want us to run another poll, just for me to just ask you, what do you think would slow you down the most when you're thinking about hiring or even setting up in Africa? I'm waiting for your votes so that I can hear what would slow you down. We are also still looking at your Q&A, and I see a lot of questions are coming in, and they're related to what you're discussing today. I'm seeing a lot of compliance question, a lot of questions regarding entry into new markets, and
They do see you.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I think someone was trying to call me while I'm using my phone to tether. So I think, Nelson, this is more related to you. When we're thinking about payroll, what happens if an organization does not understand the landscape, and what are the risks when it comes to them running payroll if they do not understand the structure of that payroll in that particular country?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, the risk there is you may run out of business because you'll either, hello, Cynthia, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
So, like I said before, the big problem with not understanding how to do the computations is that you will do them the wrong way, which is very likely to lead to huge penalties. The financial penalties in certain countries in Africa will literally get you out of business very quickly. The second is you will have, of course, an issue with employees because you understand things like Social Security is pension money. So it's like the money they will use after they've retired. So if you do a mistake and they will not be able to get the money back to them, they're obviously very worried about pension. And of course, that is just having a reputational damage issue because now you're all over the news, you're all over the tabloids and all over social media because of not doing things the right way. So over and above the risk that you'll be struck out of business, clearly, you also have the other risks as mentioned.
Yeah, I just have one more last question that I would want to ask both of you, and I think I can start with you, Cynthia. So if a company wants to hire in a new African market in the next 3 months, what is the first thing that they should prioritize on? I'll start with Cynthia and then I go to you, Nelson, because I see our time is far much gone and we have a lot of questions. Our audience is really on this topic. Cynthia, we can begin with you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Tim. If a company wants to hire in Africa in a new market in the next 3 months,
Yes.
The first thing that they need to get is the registrations. The registrations must be in place. You cannot work in the reverse. Get compliant with the local registrations before you can now start hiring. As I alluded earlier, once you do the reverse, then you're just going to get yourself in issues on delays and just very costly errors that would have been mitigated if you just get it right. Again, payroll and compliance. Before hiring, it's important to have it ready to enable you to convert in just the local statutories and compliances that you need for your employees. And then thirdly, I'd say hiring locally, because again, when you have to bring in expatriates, that's a whole new level that you have to deal with, the complexities of work visas and just how long they can be able to work with those work visas. Hence, when you have local employees, you're actually able to move, especially when you're in the projects. You know, you need the locals to be able to even get to the grassroots and speak the language of those people. Then you can get the buy-in and you find you succeed better, other than just bringing expatriates who may not understand the terrains or the languages, which can be also something that you need to consider, as not all African countries speak English. Many within the Francophone speak French, and so you need to also be worried on that. In terms of execution, again, ensuring that the team that you have, everyone has clear, defined roles, all the paperwork are in place. That will help you to reduce your time in terms of your efficiencies and operational complexities. Thank you so much. Over to you, Cynthia.
Yeah, Nelson, being someone who has been able to spearhead the conversations in Workpay, especially when it comes to EOR and helping us expand in the 30 plus countries in Africa, maybe you can now speak onto this conversation of, I want to start hiring. So what happens? What do I need to start doing? What do I need to set as my priorities?
Truthfully, unless I have a reason why I need to set up a company, the first thing I will do is to find a new work very quickly and get on board with them. Because the realities of hiring and setting up the infrastructure needed to hire these people, pay them, to pay their taxes, to be compliant from a legal and compliance standpoint is so high. The bar is so high, unless there's a clear reason why I need people in country, I think I would actually continue without any form of hesitation.
Thank you for that. So I think we can go over to our questions, and I would want to start with you, Nelson. This is a very big question, a very long question that has been asked about the challenges of retrieving funds in some of the countries. Maybe you can just address it and also just speak about delaying in terms of funds, and also speak about legal, permissible, repatriated, I think, funds that cannot be legally repatriated to their maybe home country.
Yes. So Cynthia, let me just go by chronology, by order of how the questions came in. So, Yes,
you can proceed, Nelson.
Yes, so there's a question here that says, if I have an existing entity in Africa, Are there any limitations or laws around hiring contractors instead of permanent employees? So the answer to that question is there's no law prohibiting you from hiring people as contractors, but the truth is whenever the tax authorities are running their audits, almost always they'll try to find a way to reclassify these people to be employees. And this happens almost always in Anglophone countries. It's very, very hard for you not to get an audit when you're hiring these contractors. And that audit, if you've been doing this, it's just a matter of time before the guys come for you to do an audit there. Now, there's another long question here. So they are talking about the challenges of retrieving funds from Ethiopia, Ghana, Lesotho, all these other places. And they just want me to clarify whether this difficulty is based on the law or there are certain laws that say you can get the money out. The truth is, the law says, oh, you can get the money out. And of course, people are very nice when you're putting money in. You know, they'll promise you that you'll get the money out very quickly. But the truth is, when you put in the money, that becomes the beginning of a long journey. And the reality of it is, the reason why they have these laws is because they actually have certain foreign exchange limitations. I'd say that they don't have the currency, or they're propping up the currency, or they are regulating it for reasons best known to them. So the truth is, you will not be able to get the money out. And for most people that have helped, and Workpay as well, almost always will not be able to get the money out from those countries. However, you can use those funds of that kitty to cater for the operations of your entity there. So case in point, you can pay salaries, you can pay the taxes, you can pay for, you know, operational bills, etc. So you can operate, but then depending on, you know, on what your monthly budget is, for you to churn like $200,000, I mean, it will take you some time, not forgetting the cost value of money. So I'll go to the next one that's addressed to me. Of course, there's some that are addressed to Cynthia, so I'll leave that to her. So the question is, what are the realistic timelines of setting up a fully foreign-owned subsidiary in Ethiopia? So I've just given you the answer, just about 3 months. But of course, you have to cater for travels. You also have to cater for having at least one director there. You also need to get a work permit to be a signatory to a bank account. You have to worry about bank accounts not working when you need them to. You also need to find a way to get an OTP to your phone number. So you need a phone number set up there. So there's certain nitty-gritties. They look small, but operating in Ethiopia is no child's play. Yeah. Then she's asked another question. And if we hire them on fixed term contract as opposed to independent contracts, what's the risk of it? The truth is, regulators or revenue authorities, if dealt with them, they're not as reasonable as you and I are. So when you get to the point of doing an audit, the truth is, if you have contractors, almost always they'll try to find a way to pin those as employees. However, of course, you may try as much as possible to write the contracts in very good language, keep the records of the invoices, keep the records of payment receipts, keep the records of timesheets, you know, like at what point did you work, etc. But the truth is, there's actually a risk. It may be remote, it may be far, but believe you me, it's coming very shortly. Yeah, so I leave that to Cynthia. You have some questions here. I leave those to you.
Yes, Cynthia, please do, sir.
Thank you, Nelson. Yeah, so I see a question on what advice I would have for new recruiters. Sorry, I was not looking at the questions, but I'd like to just share some of the insights. If you are a new recruiter getting into a new region within Africa, I would recommend, as my colleague and I have mentioned earlier, work with an employer of record. You know, they help you in terms of just setting up, especially for statutories and contracts and just those nitty-gritties. And I've mentioned that I would share some, not that I am not associated with them, but just some that we have previously used. There's multiplier is Africa Deployment Services, is also globalization services, just some of those that have been used before. Then when it comes to hiring, again, you need to get it right. Make sure that you don't commence a recruitment and you take 6 months hiring for it. You lose your best talent in the process. So once you are set and you're ready to hire, I would recommend that you move with speed so that at least you have the right team in place and you don't lose any good talent in the midst of it. Then again, understanding the country specifics when it comes to culture, when it comes to just the labor code, it's very, very important, as we have alluded earlier, that each country is very different when it comes to hiring. I would recommend using local recruiters or using international recruiters like us, where we've already been into that market and we understand, and we can make it easier for you to just be able to get the right talent. Benchmarking with similar organizations that are maybe in those countries so that you can ensure, again, as you're putting out those positions and doing your budgets, then you are aligned to the budget for the position and you're not finding yourself that you are offering lower than the other. That means you'll attract the talent and you quickly lose them to your competitors, and you don't want that to happen. The whole reason for building up is to ensure that you attract the talent and you're able to at least keep them for some time. Yeah, thank you. Let me see whether there's
another question for you.
Another question for me. I'll answer this one for the contract. I see one for, and I think it's the only one, unless I'm not able to see Cynthia. You can let me know if there's any other. Okay. Yeah, so if we hire on a fixed term contract as opposed to independent limited contract, what are the risks? Yeah, so when it comes to fixed term contracts, and I saw the other day the court ruled on this, on the fixed term contract, where the court now has confirmed that a fixed term contract is not a ticket for you to decide that you're not renewing or this person can leave after the term has lapsed. You have to follow the same procedure as whether it's an open contract, an open-ended contract, or a permanent contract. And so in some countries, you will find that you cannot give a fixed term contract, let's say for a year, twice. West Africa specifically, I am aware that you can only give a fixed term contract for up to a maximum of 3 years. After that, you must confirm the person to be either permanent or decide if you don't need the role, then you would need to do away with it. And so fixed term contracts have also an expiry time, and I believe it's the same situation in Kenya, where you cannot decide to just put employees on fixed term contracts permanently. You need to have a time where either you're advancing it after 1 year, doing 2 years, doing 3 years, just like I've seen many other organizations doing it. So when it comes to independent, let's say contractors, those are usually used in the instances where you do not want to engage full-time staff. And they can actually come in handy because you do not have any legal mandate to deduct statutories or just put them on your payroll. Contractors come in more like consultants, where you've engaged them for a period of time. You have clear TOR for them. They would come in with their tools of trade. For example, they have their laptops and everything. They have their defined in terms of what needs to be delivered. And so I have seen many organizations actually embrace that, the use of contractors, the use of consultants, just to be able to manage costs. But also these are people that are highly experienced, and they would come in and bring wealth of experience and just helping you with the setup. Yeah, so the risk, as I have mentioned, is you cannot maintain a fixed term contract for a long time. Once it's lapsed, you have to decide that you're keeping the person. And then again, country specific, you have to research and find out how long can actually be someone be on a fixed term contract, so that again you don't get yourself into legal issues. I believe unless anyone else has a question. Cynthia, is there any other question I may have missed out?
You covered them all.
Okay, excellent. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you, Cynthia. Even as we wait for Cynthia and Jerry to come back, for our audience, if there is any other question that you may be having, please feel free to put it down here. We are winding up, and we'd like to just run one final poll, even as our speakers are preparing for the parting shot from this conversation. As you mentioned, we will compile a list of what we have discussed today and share the recording. In case you want to go back to it and talk to us from after this conversation. So please let us know, would you like to learn more about hiring with EOR in 2026? Even as you tell us that, I think I want to invite Nelson to give us his final remarks.
Yeah. So thank you very much for joining. I'm happy to engage with you in other forums. Of course, if you have any questions, you can reach to us at Workpay. You can reach to me through LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to share my insights, tips, do's and don'ts, and the key things you need to understand about Africa. So thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, for moderating. Thank you, Nelson, my co-speaker. I wish to thank everyone that has been in attendance this evening. I have a YouTube channel, Cynthia Burugu, and I'm available on LinkedIn should you need to continue the conversation on how to hire in Africa. And we are available also to be able to support you with hiring across all African countries. We have the experience and expertise, and we sincerely want to thank you for joining us on this conversation this afternoon. Thank you, Workpay, for organizing this very interactive. I believe each and everyone here has some learnings and takeaways from this session. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. And if you'd want to interact with us, our lines are open. You can connect us to us on our LinkedIn, the Workpay LinkedIn, and also you can connect to me directly, Cynthia and Jerry. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.